My name is Mason Shaver, and this is my area of the warehouse.
I still remember like it was yesterday. The Bast sent me on a mission to retrieve a, quote, valuable item from his house. But I was on a mission to find out what exactly had happened to our world.
Approaching the warehouse, the player will notice there's a window that they can crawl through by stacking boxes and climbing up to the window. Once through the window, the player will need to pick up a tape recording to the left. With the tape recording, the player will then need to exit the warehouse by proceeding through the first door. The player will then be able to pick up a health pack to the left and then proceed through the next door. Once inside the warehouse, the player will then notice that there's a crane to the left and a platform to the right with a crane controller. To reach the crane controller, the player will need to move some boxes and jump across the broken stairs and reach the top of the platform. The player will then be instructed that there is no power to the warehouse, but it can be turned on by interacting with the fuse box to the right. Once the power is back on, the lights will turn on and the player can interact with the crane controller. The crane will then lift the crate and the player can crawl underneath the crate and reach the warehouse door. The player then can open up the warehouse door and exit the warehouse. The player will then notice they're blocked in by some pallets and will need to pick up the burning barrel with the grapnel in order to break down the pallets. Moving forward, the player will notice they're still blocked in and need to move back into the warehouse. Once back in the warehouse, the player will notice that there's a window open in the back. The player can access a hidden collectible by moving the crate and crawling underneath. In order to reach the top of the shelves, the player will need to stack boxes. Once on top of the shelves, the player will then need to stack the planks in between the shelves and walk across them. The player will notice there's some hidden cash to the right on a platform. Once through the window, the player will need to crouch underneath and then pick up a rock and smash through the broken wall. Once again, the player will come across pallets blocking the way and will need to use the burning barrel to break them down. The player will then notice that the gate is closed, but it can be opened by accessing the button in the booth. In order to exit, the player will need to move some crates out of the way and leave the first area.
This is Jonah Stewart, and this is my area called Desert.
Leaving the warehouse, I decided to take a detour of my own. Primary pharmaceutical labs. If there were answers to be found, I knew they could be found there.
Upon entering the area, the player will notice that the warehouse's power sources have been turned off, and they will try the front door to see if it works. When they try it, they will be notified that it's jammed and will need to find another way in. The player will notice a breakable wall and that they can knock down with their body or the grapnel. Upon entering, they can turn on their flashlight using the F key or press shift to apply better visuals in close quarters. Before them, they will need to use their grapnel to push and pull these crates out of the way in order to progress. And progressing forward, they would hit a tripwire that will cause them 20 damage, alerting them that they need to be more aware. They will look around for a generator room to figure out a way to restore power, and they will then need to find 2 power cores. In this other area, they will need to maneuver past trip mines and use the rocks to locate the trip mines and find one of the power cores at the back wall. Once they have acquired it, they will need to find one more that is somewhere in the warehouse. They will then notice another breakable wall, and they will use their body to break it down, and they will now need to look under these boxes for the last power core. Once they acquire it, they will need to return to the generator room so they can restore power and unlock a door that will lead to the next area. The player will notice a sandstorm that is going on, and they will need to traverse this fallen building, but they need to be careful because there are also parts of the building that fall once the player touches them, so they will need to go fast. Moving into the sand dune area, there's health packs to the left if they wish, but they will also need to either go left or right to reach the facility, crouching on the rocks. Upon entering the facility, the doors will close behind them so they can only progress forward. They will then discover a DNA canister, and there are a total of 3. They will need to find a way out of this room, and upon closing in on a door, it will open due to their touch. Also, there are secrets within this warehouse, this facility, that the player can find by figuring out riddles if they so choose, but they will then need to traverse these malfunctioning doors. Once they do so, they will notice a collectible that will lead them down the right path, and they will need to move these crates out of the way. In the next area, they will need to jump from platform to platform, avoiding the acid pit, and they will need to reach the back wall, which will open a door that will lead to the next part. They will then need to find the laser grid room, but off to the right there is a secret door that if they notice, they can turn on, and it will provide them with collectibles. They will then need to look for the other 2 DNA canisters, and once they find one, they will notice one that is covered in goop that will give some backstory as to what possibly provided that goop. They will then need to traverse through the laser grids carefully as they deal high amounts of damage. They will then also come across the first moving lasers that will be shown in later areas. Once they have acquired all 3 DNA canisters, they need to find the glassed room where they will deposit their DNA canisters and be able to progress to the next area. There will also be some backstory once they deposit their DNA canisters as to what possibly was inside the DNA canisters that will be shown on screen. Now that they have completed this area, they will move on to the next.
Leaving the lab, I realized that this outbreak was not an accident. Somebody had caused this event. And lucky me, I'd been exposed to the virus. Looks like the answers I was trying to find found me.
This is Luigino Perez, and welcome to the gold version of the derelict ship mission. Since beta, I've added shipping container assets that the player can search for scrap metal. As with my previous work, I modeled and textured them through Blender 3D. They sport hinged doors and crates that the player can manipulate with the grav null, and while they're not shown during this video, you can find them on the aft end of the ship once you climb on board. For aesthetics, I've made new models for the hatches in the console located on the ship's bridge. The hatches operate the same as the previous iterations, but have a more believable look for ships. And the player is no longer required to interact with the console as well. However, I added a camera feed display to it to make it more interesting and believable. In the cargo hold, I've added lighting to highlight main interaction points for the player. I also changed the trigger volume and script for the forklift. The trigger volume is now strictly on the platform that the player must stand on, which has a breadcrumb item to help lead the player. The change in the script was to ensure that the functionality wouldn't bug out and try to run the up and down animation at the same time. The toxic gas setup now has audible and visual cues in the form of an alarm system to give it a sense of urgency. The control panel has a new look and now has crates blocking it to make the setup more challenging. In the boiler room, I've fixed a bug that would play the boiler's audio source continuously and from any distance away from the player.
Leaving the boat, the thought entered my mind. Maybe at the Bast's home, there was some clue leading to the location of the cure. I knew I had to get there as soon as possible. I was already starting to feel different. I'm Caleb Massey, and this is the Mansion on the Cliff. First thing the player needs to do is get out of this shack, and in order to do that, they'll crouch under this ladder and grab this crowbar, which will allow them to remove the barrier that's blocking the door. This pickup here is the first one of a collection that you can find along the way. The player then needs to move these boxes that are blocking their path using the grab null. Next, these items can't be moved with the grab null, so the player needs to jump. Coming into this garage, the player will see something that looks like it's missing a component, and as they go around the car, they'll find the top of the turnstile, and this will introduce the turnstile mechanic that's found throughout the level. The player can interact and cause the door to open in front of them. As the player follows the breadcrumb around the corner and down the stairs, they enter into the basement where they see an electrified floor that will harm them, but if they grab this EMP and interact with this junction box, it will shut it off for a period of time, allowing them to cross safely. The player then needs to move the bookcase with their grab null and continue up the ladder into the main part of the mansion. Moving these boxes out of the way, the player enters into the main foyer, which will show the player that they need to go upstairs using the elevator, but the elevator is broken. So they don't have all the parts they need, and they need to look around for the two parts to the elevator. The first one can be found in this room right here, and when the player walks in, they'll see two more turnstile bases. The one on the left is the only one that's necessary, and the other one will take you to a collectible, but we're not going to worry about that for now. Interacting with the turnstile causes the barrels to move, which will position them so that the player can jump and grab the first elevator part. After grabbing the first part and continuing downstairs, the player can see this breadcrumb here, which will lead them to another EMP floor where they can grab the second elevator part. After grabbing both parts, the player can approach the barrier and remove it in order to fix the elevator and continue upstairs to the library. And in the library, the player will see a combination of the mechanics that they have experienced along the way. So the first thing the player sees that they need to do is find this particular bookcase. So after crouching under this bookcase here and interacting with this junction box, the player can see a turnstile top in the back. They can launch it over the electrified floor, disable the floor, and then head back where they came from to construct the turnstile base. Once it's constructed, they can interact with it to move this bookcase, revealing a junction box to disable the last EMP floor, blocking the bookcase that they were trying to reach. The player can then use their crowbar that they found in the beginning to remove the bookcase, and then they'll use that same crowbar to move the statue, and then they can leave the mansion with a valuable item in tow. The player will continue down the stairs and into the next area. Along with the necklace I found in the Bast's room, there was a note. This note said that the cure could be found in the building down the street. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, I suppose.
My name is Jared Bradley, and this is my scene, The Decaying Environment. The objective for the player here is for them to get to the top floor of the building in order to find the cure. There is debris blocking the lobby, so in order to get to the first floor, they can use the debris pile, but they have to access it from the garage. They can use the car here to knock out a section of the garage wall, or jump over it and then cross over into the building. After that, they can do some exploring or just navigate the debris heading toward the lighter looking staircase, indicating that it has a path. Here they have to climb up a staircase that's falling apart. They stack some debris, allowing them to get by, and then they see a board that looks like it might be able to be knocked over by the bricks here. After a couple hits, the board does indeed get knocked over and create a path for the player to cross. After that, they have to watch out for some fallen debris and then lift some fallen debris in order to progress. Seeing the stairs are knocked out, they have to cross the floor to get to the next staircase. Careful as the floor shifts and debris slides to their intended path. After that, they have to continue going up the stairs, crouching and then jumping to finally reach the top floor. Once reaching the top floor, they have to search for the cure. They're led over to the proper path by the edge of a glowing collectible. Now, the collectible they get wasn't what they were looking for. It's not the cure. So they have to continue looking. First getting past the lasers, making their way finally to the elevator that's been stuck at the top floor. Upon reaching the elevator, they see the walls weathered differently and they inspect it with E.
I had obtained the location of the cure, but I wasn't feeling like myself. The world started to look stranger. Was this a result of the infection, or was this real?
After taking the secret elevator, there's some lasers you have to get by in order to activate the panel that was similar to Jonah's level to open the secret door behind you. Now this, with proper timing, can be done easily first time, and it's a nice little ramp up to Tevin's level. And then you use the EMP from Caleb's in order to finally get to Tevin's level.
Hello everyone, my name is Tevin Brown, and this is my level called the Puzzle Palace. The first thing you notice are some crates. You need to use one of them to get to the ledge where the vent is, because this door is jammed. And there's also some gold you can collect. After crawling through the vent, you'll find a switch you need to turn on to power the electricity and the defenses in the building, like this laser grid. After passing through the laser grid, you'll find a first puzzle where you need to push the blocks to their colored pressure plates to open the doors and proceed through the area. The first thing you need is the lens. There are 4 in total inside the level that you need to collect to get through the final vault door. This here is the maze. There are 2 switches you need to find in order to open the gate until the next area. After the maze, you'll find yourself with 2 choices. One of the objects will open the door, the other one will cause damage to the player. And here is the final puzzle room. It's a jumping puzzle. There's the pattern you need to take is on the floor at the start. All you have to do is jump on the correct platforms in the right order, and you'll be able to get across the other side. Here is another bridge where you have to step on the right patterns, because the wrong ones will activate the turrets and you'll die, take damage. And finally, here's the vault door. Open it, and inside you'll find some gold and the cure. And that's the end of my level.
I did it. I escaped the infamous Puzzle Palace. Now, I just need to take the cure. This is the cure, isn't it?